I woke aching from head to toe, every muscle sore from the chaos of yesterday. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods drifted up from the ladder from Mama Bear's kitchen, which was warm, rich and almost unreal after so many days of salt water and stale crusts. For a moment it felt like a dream, but then I remembered that we still had so much to do. On the bed to my left, Voy was still out cold, sprawled in peaceful sleep. I'd been haunted all night by visions of zombies, shootouts and blood, but Voy hadn't stirred once. Somehow sleep came easy for that one, like nothing in the world could touch them. I slid out of bed, grabbed the camo pack and checked my gear before heading down. The sight waiting in the kitchen nearly stopped me in my tracks. A full spread of food, fresh, steaming, golden, laid out across the table. After days of drifting on that raft, battered by storms and forced to scavenge like animals, this looked like something out of a royal feast. Voy climbed down the ladder moments later, eyes lighting up at the sight, with hands rubbing together in delight. The first words out of that mouth were, "You won't see a better spread than that." But the grin shifted when a folded note caught our eyes, resting by the bread. Mama Bear's handwriting laid out the truth. "Take what you need," the message said. "The last stage of your journey will be fraught with danger." Beside the note sat 2 high-powered rifles with polished scopes, boxes of ammunition stacked neatly at their side. Mama Bear hadn't just been a baker. Survival ran through every part of her life. Voy's face lit up at the sight of the rifle, fingers running over the weapon like it had been waiting there all along. My eyes stayed on the rest of the message. "You'll need money where you're going. I reckon Unity Cove or Unity Cave won't let anyone in for free, if it even exists." Our stash of dirty bills wasn't going to be nearly enough. The note mentioned a police station further north of us in a small coastal town. Renegades had taken it over, and somewhere inside was an old chest from a ransom job gone wrong. If we could get our hands on it, the cash inside would be enough to barter safe passage up the coast. I folded the note and slipped it into the pack. Mama Bear had given us food, weapons and hope, but the next step wouldn't come easy. Whatever waited at the police station, it wasn't going to hand over a fortune without a fight. The sea was like a graveyard in some areas. Hulks of ships leaned half buried in the sand, their steel bones jutting from the tides like ribs of giants. Then they saw it, a massive old steel merchant ship, wedged against the reef, its hull torn open and tilting to one side. Rust streaked down its sides like blood, and gulls wheeled above the wreck, screaming into the blue sky. They climbed aboard through a jagged tear in the plating, the interior smelling of salt, oil and rot. The holds were gutted, long stripped by scavengers, but at the northern side of the ship, behind collapsed containers and corroded chains, they found something miraculous. A motorboat, small, sleek, fuel drums lashed beside it. The paint was scarred, but a symbol scrawled across it made Voy stiffen. A jagged white streak like a claw slash. "The mark of the White Fury," Voy muttered. Taffy crouched, a hand over the symbol. "So, the stories are true. White Fury really came through here." The boat's engine still sat intact, a battered toolkit left on the seat, a working escape. Compared to their dying raft, this was a treasure. "We'll take it," Taffy said firmly. Within the hour, the motor coughed to life, spitting smoke before settling into a steady growl. They both smiled, but now they were going to be leaving behind that battered old raft that had carried them all this way. It was little more than a heap of patched plastic and driftwood, every wave threatening to tear it apart, but it had indeed done them proud nonetheless. As they steered it out into the shallows, the rusted carcass of the merchant ship loomed behind them. Swallowed slowly by the tide, for the first time in weeks, they weren't crawling along any longer like prey. They were now moving at speed, and the coastline itself unrolled before them like a wound, towns in ruins, piers broken, beaches littered with debris, bones and burnt out camps. But they needed to stop and rest up and have some food, to get off the water for a while and stretch their legs. So they pulled a motorboat ashore beside an abandoned promenade, and the air had already turned heavy with that familiar stench of salt, rust and decay. They always scavenged first, then would secure a small area before lighting the fire and cooking up. Taffy and Voy moved like shadows along the abandoned promenade, boots crunching over shattered glass, eyes scanning the empty arcades for food and the boarded up cafes for anything worth taking. Voy kicked over an overturned stroller, finding nothing but mouldy cloth. Taffy pried open the rusted shutters of an old souvenir shop and came back with a fistful of cans, mostly dented but still sealed. "Jackpot," Taffy whispered. Though the grin was tight and wary, food was food, but the more they lingered, the coastal town seemed to wake. There was an uneasy silence, that smell of salt and rust, but this time something fouler. It came first as a shuffle in the distance, then as a chorus of groans, echoing through the deserted streets. Shadows limped out from the alleyways, the undead, drawn to the sound of scavengers disturbing their graveyard town. "Shit," Voy muttered, raising a rifle. "Here we go again." The two opened fire, gunshots cracking like thunder across the waterfront. Skulls burst, bodies dropped, but more poured from the shop fronts and broken doors. And behind the tide of corpses came something worse. Small gangs of renegades, painted faces, sneering machetes, glinting, raiders hunting the hunters. The promenade quickly turned to chaos. Taffy and Voy retreated, sprinted up a staircase into a crumbling guest house. The walls were riddled with bullets, the windows barricaded with broken furniture. They slammed the door and braced it, panting hard. "We're outnumbered," Taffy said, fumbling a clip into a pistol. "Down to a few bullets, mate." Voy checked their weapon. 1 bullet. That was all. They exchanged a look that said everything. Better to go out fighting than to be torn apart. The door burst inwards. The undead flooded the lobby, and the nearby gangs waited with weapons poised. The two pressed their backs to the wall, raising their guns for one final stand. And then the world went black with thunder. Automatic fire ripped through the mob, spraying the room with carnage, screams, roars, and the wet thud of bodies hitting the ground. From the smoke and dust, a figure emerged, dressed head to toe in black camo, visor down, moving like death itself. It was the Reaper. The figure cut through the raiders and corpses alike, twin guns blazing until the building itself seemed to shudder. The last of the gang fled, screaming into the night, then silence fell again, thick and suffocating. Taffy and Voy stood frozen, hearts pounding, as a dark figure reloaded and lowered their weapon. "You again," Voy breathed. Relief was washing over a sweat-soaked face. The Reaper removed the visor, just enough for their eyes to show. Cold, sharp, but alive. "Yeah," came the flat reply. "And this time, I'm finished. White Fury's dead." Taffy blinked, stunned. You found them?" Reaper nodded, dropping into a chair like the weight of the world had finally lifted from their shoulders. "Tracked them for 3 years, across wastes, through fire, through hell. White Fury killed an innocent person, someone who never deserved this world's cruelty. Tonight, I ended it." There was no victory in their tone, only exhaustion. They all sat together in the wreckage, the 3 of them breathing hard, sharing silence that felt heavier than words. Then Reaper pulled a battered tin from their pack and rolled 3 joints with steady hands. Time to mark the end. The smoke filled their lungs, bitter and grounding. For the first time in weeks, laughter cracked the tension. Relief, survival, a moment stolen from death. When the smoke thinned, Reaper went to work. They laid out the rifles, pistols and knives, stripping them with efficiency of a soldier. Barrels oiled, bolts tightened, triggers checked, then fresh magazines, a sidearm apiece, and even cleaning kits were slid across the table. "You'll need these," Reaper said. "The road ahead doesn't get any easier." Taffy accepted the gear with both hands, eyes shining. "You've saved our asses twice now. Don't know how to thank you." The visor came down again, the ghost of a smile tugging at Reaper's lips. "Stay alive. That's thanks enough." They watched in silence as the dark angel of the wastes, their unlikely saviour, slipped away, back into the shadows, and within a moment the Reaper was gone. And outside, the waves still crashed against the broken shore, carrying the dead back into the sea. Voy turned to Taffy, clipped in his sidearm, and with renewed vigour said, "Let's get the fuck out of here." The sea was cold steel under a bruised sky as Taffy and Voy sailed the small wooden motorboat along the ragged coast. Once it had belonged to the dreaded White Fury, the terror of these coastal wastes. But he was gone, hunted down and butchered by the Reaper after 3 relentless years. For the first time in a long time, the coast felt lighter, but the world hadn't changed. Only the predator at its top had fallen. They guided the stolen boat towards the corpse of a coastal town where the police station was. The air stank of brine, smoke and rot. Somewhere inside the ruins of this police station, renegades squatted on piles of loot and cash, money enough to buy passage north. Taffy leaned over the prow, whispering, "If Unity Cove's real, we'll need every last bill." Voy tightened his grip on the tiller and said, "If it isn't, we'll be too dead to care." As they drifted along the shoreline, shapes watched them approach, and dozens of shambling figures drifted towards the piers and promenades, jaws hanging open, eyes white and lifeless. They quickly tied the boat up next to a fuel depot on the harbour side, but before they could think or secure a small area, the hordes were upon them. Voy threw guns and ammo over to Taffy as they dodged the hail of bullets from the renegades and fought through the streets filled with corpses. Taffy's blade was slick, Voy's rifle barking smoke. They moved around the back of a church, and there the police station stood like a carcass. Window shatters, doors chained, walls tagged with renegade graffiti. Inside it was worse. Men in ragged armour fired crude weapons from behind barricades, shrieking curses as they defended their horde. Bullets tore through plaster. The air was a storm of dust and screams. Taffy and Voy surged forward, breaking the defenders like waves against rotten wood. The ground floor was almost theirs when a reinforcing renewed attack happened. And now they were back defending the ground floor. They were split up, with Voy fighting his way up to the first floor, while Taffy tried to stop the hordes coming in through the lower windows. Taffy was being overrun, blood pouring out of his wounds. It looked like he was in trouble, but Voy, on seeing this, hopped over the handrail of the staircase, threw Taffy a shotgun, and between them, somehow, they reduced the enemy numbers. Voy patched Taffy up while he covered the stairs. It was a scene of carnage, body parts on the tiles, and walls dripping with blood. Then a further rumble came, heavy boots above them on the first floor, protecting the loot. This was the thunder of the second wave. They looked at each other, reloaded, and headed up the stairs, guns blazing. From the top of the stairwell, a very well-armed renegade leader psychotically laughed and sprayed bullets down towards them. The whiz and the crack of these over their heads sounded terrifying and final, but they had to hold on and fight. The station became like a war zone. Taffy fought from the shattered windows, mowing down zombies swarming to the noise. Voy duelled the renegade leader on the stairs, and up on the first floor with sparks flying as the bullets ricocheted off the police station railings. Loot was everywhere, crates of valuables, cash on the tables, and a metal chest brimming with notes. But time was thin. The renegades howled, driving against their barricades. The dead hammered at the walls from outside. The renegades' leader's guns jammed, and he went at Voy with his knife, catching Voy's shoulder, tearing flesh. It was face-to-face fighting now, up close and personal. Voy staggered, blood spilling, but drove his own blade up beneath the man's ribs, ending him with a wet crunch. Taffy screamed over the chaos. "We've got enough. The chest is full of cash." As Taffy heaved the metal chest of loot towards the rear exit, a deafening crash shook the building. The front barricade had finally collapsed, and a tide of dead things poured in. They carved away through the horde, dragging the money chest over the corpses and rubble. The station burned behind them, flames licking skyward like a beacon. The streets were now worse. Renegades rallying, zombies swarming, buildings collapsing in smoke. The town itself seemed to scream. At the pier, they threw the loot onto the boat, with the motor coughing to life under Voy's trembling hand. The dock shook as clawing, moaning figures spilled after them, Taffy still firing rounds into them as the boat drifted free and the sea swallowing the pier behind. Taffy slumped in exhaustion, staring at the firelit horizon. "Unity Cove," he whispered. "It has to be real." Voy didn't answer. He was staring at the deck, where the blood dripped steadily from his shoulder, pooling black against the wood. "It's just a scratch," Taffy said. Voy looking at him in disbelief. "A bit of tequila-soaked rag over that and you'll be fine." Voy looked up and said to him, "Just bandage it and I'll swig the tequila." They both smiled, and as the town disappeared into the sky, the last final destination was just an hour or two away. Unity Cove or cave was now in reach. But was all the blood, sweat and tears going to be worth it? They would soon find out.